the isolated reaches of northern Maine, November brings more than just biting winds and early darkness. Here, in a landscape swallowed by frost and silence, the townsfolk speak in hushed tones about the events that began with the season's first cold snap. Police records show a sudden spike in missing persons, each vanishing without a trace from homes locked tight against the chill. Locals recall strange footprints appearing overnight in the snow, too large, too deep, and always leading toward the woods. As winter tightened its grip, a sense of dread settled over the community, hinting at something far more sinister lurking just beyond the edge of the lamplight. Nestled deep in the frost-bitten valleys, the town of Marrow Hollow has always carried an uneasy reputation. Locals whisper of a chilling pattern each November. As the nights grow longer, strange occurrences begin to stir. Police archives detail unexplained disappearances, sudden power outages, and reports of eerie laughter echoing through empty streets. Eyewitnesses recall seeing shadowy figures lingering near abandoned homes, their faces twisted into unnatural smiles. For decades, these events have returned with haunting regularity, leaving the community gripped by a quiet dread. Each year, the question remains: what awakens in Marrow Hollow when the cold sets in? As winter settles over the town, police records show an unsettling trend. A sudden surge in missing persons reports, each case more perplexing than the last. The authorities, seasoned in handling disappearances, find themselves at a loss. There are no footprints in the snow, no signs of struggle, and no clues left behind. Families describe loved ones vanishing without warning, sometimes in the dead of night, sometimes during a routine walk home. The cold seems to swallow all traces, leaving investigators grasping at shadows. What force could erase so many lives so completely? And why does it strike only when the temperature falls? Archival footage reveals rows of empty houses, their windows dark and unwelcoming, while photographs capture frost clinging to every surface, as if the cold itself is trying to erase what remains. The silence in these images is palpable, broken only by the distant echo of footsteps that no longer belong to anyone. Each frame seems to whisper stories of sudden departures and secrets left behind. The sense of abandonment is overwhelming, raising a chilling question. What drove an entire community to vanish without a trace? On a cold November night, retired officer Samuel Hayes remembers the silence that hung over the town like a shroud. What began as a routine patrol quickly unraveled when he received a call about a missing family. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of struggle, just an empty house and a dinner table set for 5. Hayes describes the chilling quiet as he and his team combed through the abandoned rooms, their flashlights flickering against peeling wallpaper. Outside, the wind carried distant, unexplainable whispers, and neighbors spoke of seeing strange figures lingering near the woods. To this day, the disappearance remains unsolved, leaving behind only questions and a lingering sense of dread. Each November, as the days grow shorter and the cold creeps in, a suffocating silence settles over the town. Residents recall how even the wind seems to hold its breath, leaving the streets unnaturally quiet. But beneath this stillness, unsettling noises echo through the night. Soft footsteps on empty roads, distant whispers that fade before they can be traced, and the occasional, inexplicable tapping against window panes. One local resident described the experience as if the town itself were waiting for something. its silence broken only by sounds that have no clear source. What, if anything, lurks in the darkness remains a question no one dares to answer. In the winter of 2017, the quiet town of Hollow Creek was shaken by the sudden disappearance of high school teacher Margaret Ellis. Days before she vanished, Margaret confided in colleagues about seeing strange, flickering lights deep within the woods bordering her property. On the night she went missing, police recovered a single voicemail left on her sister's phone, her voice trembling, barely audible, muttering about shadows moving between the trees and something watching from the dark. The authorities found no signs of forced entry, only her car parked neatly in the driveway and her coat draped over a kitchen chair. To this day, no trace of Margaret has ever been found, and the meaning behind her final, cryptic message remains a chilling mystery. On the evening of November 12th, Mrs. Elaine Harper was last seen leaving the school parking lot just after dusk. Security footage captured her car turning onto the old Mill Road, a road she rarely took. Hours later, her vehicle was discovered abandoned on the outskirts of town, its doors unlocked and headlights still glowing in the fog. Inside, investigators found her purse untouched, a single child's drawing on the passenger seat, and muddy footprints leading away into the woods. No one could explain why the radio was tuned to static, or why the rearview mirror had been carefully turned to face the back seat. On a bitter January night, the Mercer family awoke to the unmistakable crunch of footsteps circling their isolated farmhouse. The sounds grew louder, deliberate, as if someone or something was pacing just beyond the frosted windows. Terrified, they waited until dawn, clutching each other in silence. When daylight finally crept over the fields, they ventured outside, expecting to find evidence in the fresh snow. But the ground was untouched, pristine, not a single footprint to be seen. To this day, no one can explain what stalked their home that night, or why it left no trace behind. Forensic experts arrived at the scene before dawn, their breath visible in the cold air as they began their meticulous search. They found no fingerprints, no footprints, not even a trace of disturbed dust on the warped floorboards. The only evidence, if it could be called that, was a faint, lingering odor, sweet and metallic, clinging to the walls. In their official report, investigators noted the unsettling absence of any physical clues, as if the perpetrator had simply vanished into thin air. This void of evidence would haunt the case for years, leaving one chilling question: what kind of presence leaves no trace at all? On a cold October night, the local 911 dispatch received a call that would haunt them for years. A trembling teenage voice described shadowy figures lurking just beyond the reach of their porch light, silent and unmoving, eyes glinting from the darkness of the tree line. The operator tried to reassure the caller, but the line crackled with static, and the teen whispered that the figures were getting closer. Police arrived minutes later, but found only footprints in the wet grass, too large to belong to any animal. To this day, no one can explain what watched from the woods, or why the air still feels colder near that house. Police dispatch logs from that night paint a chilling picture of confusion and rising dread. Officers can be heard on audio recordings, their voices tense as they sweep the empty streets and abandoned lots, reporting back with nothing but static and silence. Each call grows more frantic, the sense of unease mounting as the search yields no trace of the missing. In the background, faint, inexplicable noises sometimes bleed through the radio, whispers or or perhaps just the wind. To this day, no one can explain what the officers truly encountered in those dark hours. In the early hours of a bitter January morning, Harold Whitaker awoke to an unnatural chill seeping through his modest farmhouse. As he shuffled toward the window, delicate frost patterns had formed across the glass, but these were no ordinary swoops. They traced the unmistakable outline of a name, each letter sharp and deliberate, etched in ice. Harold swore he had never heard the name before, yet the sight filled him with a sense of dread he could not explain. Or what had chosen his window as a canvas for this cryptic message? The handwriting analyst, a seasoned expert with decades of experience, pores over the samples collected from the crime scene. She notes the peculiar slant of each letter, the unnatural pressure, and the way the ink seems to bleed in patterns that shift under different light. Despite her expertise, she finds no rational explanation for the recurring symbols that appear in every note. Her official report concludes with a single, unsettling line. The patterns do not match any known human hand. What, then, could be guiding the pen behind these sinister messages? In the winter of 1997, a group of seasoned hunters ventured deep into the Black Hollow forest, expecting nothing more than the familiar silence of snow and pine. But as dusk settled, an unnatural fog crept in, swallowing their lantern light and muffling their voices. According to police reports, the men began to hear faint whispers, not from the trees, but rising from beneath the frozen earth itself. One hunter described the voices as pleading, others as mocking, all echoing in a language none could understand. By dawn, only two would return, both refusing to speak of what they saw when the ground began to tremble beneath their feet. In a dimly lit room, one of the hunters sits across from investigators, his hands trembling as he recounts the night they tried to escape the woods. At first, his story is straightforward. Lost in the fog, the group retraced their steps, desperate to find the main road. But as he continues, his voice falters. He describes a suffocating silence that fell over the forest, broken only by the sound of footsteps that didn't belong to any of them. He remembers glancing back and seeing fleeting shapes between the trees, their faces twisted in unnatural smiles. The hunter's account ends abruptly, his eyes fixed on the floor, refusing to say what he saw when he finally turned around. What exactly followed them out of the woods that night remains unanswered. In the winter of 1998, a series of handwritten journal entries surfaced from a small, frost-bitten town. The pages, penned by a mother named Evelyn, chronicle her growing unease as her daughter, Lily, begins wandering the house at night. Each entry grows more desperate, describing how Lily's eyes remain open but vacant, her lips whispering phrases that make no sense. Fragments like, "He's waiting in the hallway," and "Don't let him smile." As the nights progress, the mother's handwriting becomes more frantic, her fear palpable. What or who was Lily seeing in her dreams? And why did the words she spoke seem to echo through the house long after she returned to bed? Psychologists consulted on the case suggested the phenomenon might be explained by shared delusions, a rare but documented occurrence where fear and anxiety ripple through families, distorting reality. Yet, when investigators listened to the mother's trembling voice, her terror felt raw and immediate, far more than a simple trick of the mind. She described shadowy figures lurking in the hallway, and the chilling sensation of being watched even in her own home. Her accounts left experts unsettled, questioning whether something else, something unseen, had taken root in the quiet darkness. Was this merely a psychological episode, or was there a presence no one could explain? In the winter of 2012, 5 friends set up camp beside the silent expanse of Blackwater Lake, a place long whispered about in local folklore. By morning, their tents stood undisturbed, sleeping bags still warm, and food left uneaten. The only sign of distress was a single bloody handprint smeared across the icy surface, its origin never explained. Police reports detail a thorough search, yet no footprints led away from the site, and no evidence pointed to foul play. Locals still speak of the chilling silence that followed, wondering what unseen force could erase a group so completely, and why it left that solitary mark behind. Search and rescue teams arrived at the scene, only to be met by an unsettling silence that seemed to swallow every footstep. The air was heavy, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Investigators combed the area, but the evidence they found defied explanation. Personal belongings arranged in patterns, footprints that abruptly vanished, and no signs of struggle. Even seasoned officers admitted to feeling watched, their radios crackling with static in the cold, unmoving air. To this day, no one can account for what truly happened in those woods, or why the silence felt so absolute. In the winter of 1997, Father Mallory began to notice a disturbing pattern among his parishioners. One by one, townspeople arrived at his confessional, their voices trembling as they described nightly visitations, shadows at the foot of their beds, whispers echoing through empty hallways, and the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Each confession carried the same chilling detail. The apparitions bore the faces of those long presumed missing, their eyes hollow, their smiles twisted in silent accusation. Father Mallory documented these accounts in a private journal, convinced that something unnatural was stirring beneath the town's quiet surface. But as the confessions grew more frequent, he was forced to confront a question that would haunt him for years. Were these merely the products of guilt and grief, or had the lost truly returned to claim the living? Late at night, in the silence of his study, Father Mallory pressed record and began to document the strange occurrences plaguing the parish. But when investigators later reviewed these tapes, they uncovered something chilling. Faint voices layered beneath his own, whispering in a language no one could identify. Audio experts confirmed the recordings had not been tampered with, yet the voices persisted, growing clearer with each session. Some believe these voices are echoes from the town's forgotten history, secrets buried beneath decades of silence. What, or who, was trying to speak through the static remains a mystery. At each scene, investigators noted peculiar symbols etched into surfaces, crude, looping smiles carved into wood, glass, and even stone. These markings appeared alongside other unsettling patterns, clusters of withered flowers, and fragments of children's lullabies scrawled in trembling handwriting. Forensic analysts confirmed that the symbols were nearly identical, suggesting a deliberate signature left by the perpetrator. Locals whispered that these motifs echoed old folklore, tales of a figure who marked its victims with a sinister grin. The chilling consistency of these signs raised a disturbing question. Were these isolated tragedies, or the work of something far more connected and ancient? In the shadowed archives of the county library, historian Dr. Evelyn Marsh unearthed fragments of a chilling narrative. Old journals and faded parish records spoke of a curse, whispered to have taken root in the soil centuries ago. The earliest mention dates back to 1842, when a series of unexplained disappearances were attributed to the land itself, as if something beneath the surface demanded tribute. Local folklore described November as a time when the boundary between worlds thinned and restless spirits wandered the fields. Yet, as Dartmarsh delved deeper, she discovered a cryptic warning. Beware the smiling ones. They return when the leaves fall. What did the villagers truly fear? And why did the curse seem to awaken only in the cold, quiet days of November? Each November, as the days grow shorter and the air turns brittle, the people of Miller's Hollow become noticeably more guarded. Residents speak in hushed tones about curfews and double-locked doors, their eyes darting to shadowed corners as if expecting something to emerge. Interview transcripts reveal a community bound by unspoken rules. Children are kept indoors after dusk, and windows are draped in heavy curtains. There is a palpable tension, a sense that everyone is waiting for something they cannot name. What event could have left such a deep, lingering scar on an entire town's collective memory? Determined to expose the truth behind the chilling tales, local skeptic Daniel Mercer arrived in the town armed with logic and a flashlight. He interviewed residents, combed through police records, and dismissed the whispered legends as mere superstition. Yet, as night fell and Daniel wandered the abandoned streets, he confessed to an unsettling sensation, an icy presence lingering just beyond the reach of his torchlight. In his own words, it was as if something was watching, waiting. Despite his skepticism, Daniel left town with more questions than answers, haunted by the silence that followed him home. Years after the initial investigations faded into silence, local police returned to the cold cases that had haunted the town for decades. In the dim light of the evidence room, forgotten files were reopened, and overlooked details began to surface. Among the new findings were photographs that seemed to change with each viewing, and witness statements that contradicted themselves in unsettling ways. Instead of providing clarity, each piece of evidence only twisted the narrative further, casting longer shadows over what truly happened. As officers delved deeper, one question echoed through the empty hallways. Had they uncovered clues, or awakened something meant to stay hidden? In a dimly lit room far from her childhood home, the survivor's voice trembles as she recalls the night everything changed. She describes the silence that fell over the town, broken only by the distant echo of laughter that wasn't quite human. Her memories are fragmented, faces twisted into unnatural smiles, eyes that seem to follow her even in the darkness. Despite years of therapy and countless attempts to move on, she admits the nightmares never truly faded. When asked if she would ever return, her answer is immediate and absolute: never. But she refuses to say why, leaving one chilling question lingering in the air. What did she see that night, and what still waits in the shadows of that forgotten town? As the nights grow longer each November, the townspeople whisper of patterns too precise to ignore. Year after year, their stories echo the same chilling details: shadows moving just beyond the reach of streetlights, laughter that fades into silence, and faces glimpsed in frosted windows. Police reports, though sparse, describe disappearances with unsettling regularity, always around the same dates. Even skeptics admit the air feels different, heavier, as if something unseen prowls the empty streets. What force returns to this quiet town each autumn, and why does it choose to remain hidden, just out of sight? As the final pages of the investigation are turned, a chilling silence settles over the town. The missing details, the unexplained footprints in the snow, and the whispers that echo through empty streets remain unresolved. Residents lock their doors a little earlier now, glancing nervously at the frost gathering on their windows. With winter's return, the question persists: will the darkness stir once more when November comes? In the end, the truth remains just out of reach, waiting in the cold shadows for its next chapter.